Good afternoon, all. Oh gosh, it's the first time I hear my voice in the microphone after 5 years and COVID. So welcome all to our panel discussion. Even though it's a lovely weather outside, thank you for being with us today. My name is Katerina Garifalo. I'm the VP of New Ventures for Clean Planet Energy. And I'm extremely excited today because I have a very diverse panel to discuss chemical recycling. So I'm really happy that I have Chloe with me from Department from Transport, Helen from British Plastic Federation, and Arun from Oiko Storage. So I'm sure you can pick up that, we're trying to have each part or the majority of the supply chain when it comes to chemical recycling. Let's kick off the discussion, and I would like first to ask my panelists to introduce themselves shortly. Please pay attention because they have a very diverse background, both from private and public sector, which I found extremely interesting. So, Chloe.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, great. Hello, I'm Chloe Llanos. I am a deputy head, one of the deputy heads at the Department for Transport's Low Carbon Fuels Division within the Transport Decarbonisation Directorate, quite a few levels there. The world of low carbon fuels is really about reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our transport sector. Where have I come from? Well, actually, I'm a chemist by training. I started my own company in the world of waste recycling. I then went on to work for an incubator, helping other scientists accelerate their own work into reality, into innovation here, and then moved into the policy sector because I was quite keen to take my industry and own expertise into the world of policy in the decarbonisation world. I'll pass on.
Hi, I'm Helen Jordan. I'm the Sustainability Manager at the British Plastics Federation. So we're a trade association for the plastics industry. We represent everybody from the raw material suppliers right through to manufacturers and through to the recyclers. And part of our recycling is having chemical recyclers as members as well. So we very much see chemical recycling working in a complementary way to mechanical recycling and helping us to achieve the circular economy and achieve net zero. And just in terms of background, I used to work in local government in the recycling sector previously to working at the British Plastics Federation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Aaron Straskanda, I'm Managing Director of Oiko Storage. We are a bulk liquid import terminal on the Thames. So for those of you familiar with the kind of mass balances for liquid fuels, the UK is still heavily reliant on distillate fuels to bridge the gap between refined products that we make in the UK. Really got introduced to Clean Planet Energy. Mainly our lead client is BP, and most of you might be aware that BP have an offtake arrangement with Clean Planet Energy. So we're very keen in understanding what type of storage requirements are needed for the products that the circular economy that Clean Planet Energy are involved in. Prior to working for Oikos, I've spent most of my career in energy companies. So previously BP as well as Total Energies in bulk liquid fuels. My background is I'm a very bad biochemical engineer. That's why I went into commercial roles.
Perfect. So as you see, we're trying to have different parts of the supply chain, not all of them, but the majority. And it's a very rare occasion that we see different parts of the supply chain sitting together discussing the same problem. So I'm really eager to ask all of you, and especially you, Chloe and Ellen, what do you think is the current state of chemical recycling in the UK? Where do you think we are at the moment?
Sure, I'll go first here. So I am going to put a caveat here. Waste and recycling is the policy remit of the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, but we work really closely with them at the Department for Transport because of the key interest that we have in waste recycling purposes and recovery to be able to contribute to the diversity of low carbon fuels that we can use in our transport modes. The current state of chemical recycling, when I relate it to transport, more needs to be done. And that's partly because where we are with our legislation. I'm really pleased to say that we are finally legislating in primary legislation to be able to support recycled carbon fuels, which is a type of fossil recovery, plastic recovery into fuels. In the energy bill that's passing through Parliament now. That's going to open up a wealth of opportunity to be able to manufacture and produce recycled carbon fuels, both for fulfilling the current renewable transport fuel obligation, which is how we introduce low carbon fuels into our road system particularly, but also other modes of transport. But then also in our forthcoming SAF mandate, SAF being sustainable aviation fuel that you may have heard about in the earlier talk on the catalyst stage as part of the aviation decarbonisation talk. I think when you ask what's the current state of play, I think there are some challenges ahead of us in terms of pivoting traditional means of waste recycling to some of these more innovative means to produce recycled carbon fuels. I think that's where we need to work really well together, industry and policy and across the supply chain. And I'm keen to talk about this a bit more. I'll pass on to Helen now.
It's very, very good to hear about what you said about the energy bill, Chloe. So I'm really pleased you said that. So Ellen, from your perspective, because we're focusing more for the circularity and bringing the waste plastics back to the production of new plastics. So what do you think is the current state of chemical recycling from your point of view?
Yeah, so the first bit of legislation really that mentioned chemical recycling was the plastic packaging tax. So a few years ago when that came in, it was a bit of a buzz excitement that chemical recycling was being recognised in legislation. But at the time, there was no acceptance of mass balance as a calculation method in chemical recycling, and that's been a bit of a barrier to getting chemical recycling to grow more in the UK. So mass balance isn't the easiest thing to explain, but just essentially, because chemical recycling is in its infancy, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but when you're supplying into a big petrochemical plant, you're not going to be able to physically trace your chemical recycling material through that petrochemical plant. So what you need to do is to rely on mass balance, so your inputs are matching your outputs, and then you need to be able to allocate that to a particular product. So you, in a similar way where you would buy green fuel for your house, what's actually coming into your house isn't necessarily going to be from a renewable source, but your company has brought green renewable fuel which it's supplying to you. So it works in a similar way whereby a company is sort of, I guess, paying to have the allocation of chemical recycled material that's gone into that petrochemical plant to be applied to their product. So I'm hoping that makes sense, but that's been a bit of a barrier in the UK to getting more chemical recycling happening. So we've got a recycling roadmap we wrote in 2021, which was looking at what the recycling industry as a whole could achieve by 2030. And part of that was chemical recycling. We wanted to have 300,000 tonnes of chemical recycling in 2030. And at the time, we went and spoke to all the chemical recycling companies we were aware of in the UK, and we've just been kind of going back to those companies. And I think the feeling at the moment is that there is more that, as we've already been said, there's a lot more that could be happening with chemical recycling. A lot of the investment hasn't been taking place in the UK, it's been taking place elsewhere. There's lots of pilot plants, there's lots of research and development happening. Mura Technology are here, they're about to have their plant being commissioned. Clean Planet Energy are obviously doing great work on their plants as well. But there isn't quite the level of chemical recycling that maybe we were expecting to see at this point, and that investment's been happening elsewhere. And we very much see chemical recycling as working, as I said earlier, working alongside in a complementary way to mechanical recycling, and we want that material going back into plastic so that it's staying part of the circular economy. They're meeting net zero, as I mentioned earlier, and we see it as a really key part of that whole system. So it's something that we're really keen to see more investment in. We want more investment in recycling in general, more investment happening in the UK, keeping material in the UK, and a part of that is going to be chemical recycling. And that then gives you the recycled content that companies are wanting to use. Companies are desperate to use more recycled content in their products. They need to have that material available, particularly things like food contact applications, sensitive applications, where, you know, just mechanical recycling maybe isn't possible to do that. Chemical recycling offers an opportunity there. So I think as an overview, it's all starting to happen, which I think is great. We're expecting a consultation on mass balance soon from the government, but there's still quite a long way to go in terms of getting more facilities out there.
Aaron, yes, that's it.
So probably very unhelpful to Katarina's despair. I can't really opine too much on that topic. So why would I be here? And I think the important thing to realise is, particularly in the asset bulk fuel space, we've been very privileged, I would say, over the last 20 or so years that we've been able to be quite a reactive part of the supply chain. I think what's happened, particularly over the last 2 years with the energy transition, is that has really catalysed, no pun intended, the requirement really for existential questions for assets like Oikos to make sure they remain relevant with the energy transition. So it's forcing, our sector, our shareholders to upskill themselves in this space now to understand what are the future investments for the assets look like and what's the evolving role for independent bulk storage facilities or any kind of assets that support the energy mix.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I will come back to you, Chloe. And if you could just elaborate more on the current policies and legislation that you are working on towards that will support the chemical recycling, that would be very helpful.
Sure. Okay. I've already mentioned the energy bill work that's passing through Parliament at the moment to introduce recycled carbon fuels into our renewable transport fuel schemes. I've realised I should take a step back and say, why are we doing this? And that will help explain the policies that we're looking at. Currently, this is a stat that my team told me that I'm surprised about. 25 million tons of non-recyclable residual waste is produced in the UK each year, and that is largely sent to landfill or incinerated. So at the moment, what we're trying to do within government is understand how best should we be using these wastes. That's part of the reason why we're introducing this legislation around recycled carbon fuels. That's part of the reason why we're working so closely with DEFRA on their waste hierarchy and understanding where recycled carbon fuels and other decarbonisation technologies may sit within the waste hierarchy, and also understand, does the waste hierarchy have the right classifications there? Within that, we also are looking to be able to bring this all together as part of not just DEFRA's work, but also the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero's work on the biomass strategy, which will come out and include waste bio. Why do I bring up bio in the framework of plastics? Well, this residual waste that I just referenced, the 25 million tons produced every year in the UK, a lot of the bio side will be unlocked by allowing us to recycle the fossil aspect and put that into the RTFO or the SAF mandate. So now I'll talk a bit about the policy mechanisms as well that we're looking at. We see that there's a bit of complexity out there around all the different feedstocks. So feedstocks, I would classify plastics as a feedstock. So I would classify waste as a feedstocks. There's lots of different types of waste out there, of course. But we see there's a lot of complexity of where we should be using those. And from a transport perspective, we're developing this year a low carbon fuels strategy, which will look at the use of these feedstocks and the deployment across transport from now until 2050, aiming to provide a bit more certainty to investors, to innovators, to policy colleagues of where the role of these different feedstocks may be best used. And that also maps across to the slip of the tongue there, Department for Energy Security and Net Zero biomass strategy. With the mechanisms that we have in place, we currently have the renewable transport fuel obligation, which has a percentage of supply required from low carbon fuels each year. We're introducing recycled carbon fuels into that. We've also got the proposed SAF mandate, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel mandate, which is looking to have 10% sustainable aviation fuel sources in the aviation fuel mix from 2030. We are also funding a huge raft of SAF production, not just SAF. That's the reason I paused there, is that they do have co-products, sustainable aviation fuel demonstrator plants that have co-products and will use waste plastics as a feedstock for that. That's part of our £165 million fund, and that's all contributing to our target to have 5 SAF production plants in construction by 2025. So we are putting the money where our intention is, we are putting the policy frameworks there, we are legislating to try and achieve that. Of course, more needs to be done. We need to be able to really use this residual waste as effectively as possible. We do not want to be incentivizing waste incorrectly. We need to make sure that we reuse and recycle with the best means possible to then move it into the world of recycled carbon fuels and transport decarbonisation.
Thank you very much, Chloe. It's very encouraging from our side as investors and technical providers to see that there is a bit of traction going on from a legislation perspective. But you give me a really good link to go to Helen and talk about feedstocks, because Helen, through British Plastic Federation, you have access to a huge network of plastic and feedstock providers. And so far, we've been talking about mechanical recycling, and everybody knows about the benefits and the challenges that comes to that. But how do you communicate to your network the opportunities that the chemical recycling can bring, and what are the challenges that you're facing when doing so?
Yeah, so it's something that we've been doing a lot recently, actually, in terms of trying to inform membership, but also, we've been talking a lot to government, to ministers, to try and sort of inform them more about chemical recycling. So one thing we've just actually launched on our website is a chemical recycling information hub. So we felt that there was a lot of people actually who needed to know more about chemical recycling. And what's on there is because we talk about chemical recycling, but we're actually talking about a whole range of different technologies and different processes, which come under, some people call it chemical, some call it advanced, some call it non-mechanical. So what we've tried to do on the website is to have all the different processes in a really simple diagrams of how they work. My aim was GCSE bite-sized level. So, I'm not a chemist. I wanted to make it so that everybody could look at it and understand it. So we've got that information on there. We also really wanted to make sure there was lots of information out there on LCAs as well. So we've got information in there on the different LCAs on chemical recycling, and also very transparent on who produced them and who wrote them. So you can see that. We've got information on mass balance. We've also got information on the capacities in the UK and sharing information that companies have provided us on what they're looking to do in the UK. But in terms of feedstock is something, as well as mass balance, that's another probably the biggest issue that we hear about when we're talking to chemical recyclers. There's a great opportunity really, because there's a lot of focus around wanting to have more collection of plastics, particularly flexible plastics is something that comes up a lot. It's not something that we can generally recycle from our curbsides at home. You can take them to the local supermarket, but it's trying to find routes to be able to recycle them. Some of them can be mechanically recycled. Sometimes it's too contaminated, and actually chemical recycling could be a good solution for that. But we need to get the collections in place. So one thing we're waiting for from government at the moment is the response to the consistent collection consultation. And we're hoping that that's going to give a bit more clarity on what's happening there. Consistent collection is basically all of us being able to recycle the same thing at home, which part of that is to include flexibles from the curbside as well. So we're waiting to see what happens with that, but I think that's a real opportunity in terms of having more feedstock out there. What we're really keen on is that as new technologies are developed, what we're not doing is moving material around that somebody else was recycling and we're just giving it to a new process, a new technology. What we want to be doing is collecting more, giving opportunity to recycle lots more products than we can at the moment, and keeping them, as I say, in part of the circular economy as well. So I think, there's a real opportunity there to actually get the feedstocks that everybody needs through having more collections in place for everybody. And, when we're out and about, when we're in our offices, all these places, that there's a lot more we can do in terms of getting all of us motivated to recycle a bit more and getting more opportunities for us to be able to recycle as well.
Perfect, Ellen. Thank you very much. Very good points. Arun, I will come to you now, because you are on the receiving end of the supply chain, so you're going to receive the products. So can you talk to me more about the challenges, the infrastructure and logistical challenges that you'll be facing? Because as we all agree, there are not any commercial facilities as yet to test this infrastructure at the moment. So from Oiko's perspective, what are the challenges?
Sure. So I think if you were to go around all the other stages and hear a lot of the topics being discussed, I think it's positive to see the government putting in a lot of policies and procedures and targets for progressing towards a circular economy. But a common remark I've heard walking around is there's a lack of detail there, which stops people making the required decisions thereafter. But in converse to that, the RTFO scheme is very precise and has been operating, I think, very successfully to the extent that we see it, where over 15% of our tankage on site is being repurposed or reused in terms of fuel duty for developmental grade fuel. So we're seeing that proliferate into the market, which hopefully, Chloe, you think is encouraging. I think, for us, it's definitely that tandem between really clear policy, because we won't speculatively prepare assets. We do need that underpinned by customers, clients. So having really strong frameworks, which, as I said, the RTFO does, supports being able to do that. But for us, what we're finding is, whilst a lot of these fuels are drop-in replacements for traditional fossil bulk fuels, we're still very much in that transition phase where supply, demand, and the cost impacts for that, fossil fuels and development of fuels are running in parallel. So it's requiring a more intensive burden on assets, which we just don't have. So the real challenge I see it is having enough lead time and preparation so that we have enough assets to handle this transition period, which at the moment is quite difficult to bookmark because, you know, we're evolving as, you know, the technologies and the economy is.
Yeah, very good points. And I think so far you are used to deal with traditional hydrocarbons with a different quantities. So in chemical industry is coming in with a different quantity supply to the storage. So it's another challenge. So I think it's very easy to start focusing on the things that we don't do right, and start blaming each other, who is doing more and who is doing less. I would like to focus the last few minutes, if you can just focus on what they keep us apart, and most importantly, what do we need to do to work together in order to help the industry do better in the UK? How we can collaborate better between the different parts of the supply chain? What do we need from each other? Ellen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think in terms of the sort of feedstock side, there's a great opportunity to work more with the waste management sector. I know that, plastic going to energy from waste isn't really something that they're particularly looking for going forward. They're looking to move that material out of those facilities anyway. So I think there's a real opportunity there to work better with the waste management sector. There's also a great opportunity to get the mechanical recyclers working with the new chemical recycling companies as well, because there will be material that they get through their process that they aren't able to handle, which could go into a chemical recycling facility. So I think there really needs to be a lot of stakeholder engagement. And what we've been trying to do in terms of particularly linked to this mass balance consultation is we've just done a letter that's gone into government, which is, say, around this consultation. But what we've tried to do is to speak to the whole value chain and get whole value chain support for it, and show actually it's the whole value chain are really keen to see chemical recycling develop. They really want, they see it as a really important solution. And so what we've been trying to do is get them all to kind of all go behind the mass balance issue to try and get that moving forward, because that will help encourage more investment in chemical recycling in the UK. But also we just want to show sort of whole chemical recycling support from the industry. And I think the next sort of stage is, I suppose, to get those people talking to each other a bit more. They're all interested in it, and they all engaged with us on this letter that we've been producing. But what we want to do now is have a bit more of a conversation with them and see how everyone can work better together. So as always, it's more talking, more sharing ideas, more seeing actually your problem is actually I've got the solution to your problem. We just need to have that conversation.
I will go to Arun and I'll let Chloe at the end.
Yeah, so I think my point's quite cliched, but as I said, being at the sort of tail end of that supply chain, as you're saying, Helen, that education awareness piece I think is really important. So days like today are brilliant, so thanks again for being part of the panel, because I think it is important to have that integrated conversation and, just to raise awareness around what the sector needs, so that it can be more consolidated. So.
And Chloe, what would you like from the rest of the supply chain? How do you like to engage with you?
I'd like to thank the supply chain for engaging with us as much as they have to date. You've informed the extent of our policy formation. I can't explain the amount. There is an upcoming publication actually on the detail of recycled carbon fuels support within the RTFO, and that's all been informed by extensive engagement. I will then move on to the live consultation that we have, which is on the sustainable aviation fuels mandate. We really invite anybody who has an interest, including on waste use and feedstocks within fulfilling the Sustainable Aviation Fuel mandate, to submit an answer to the consultation. We always welcome that. We also look forward to engagement as part of our forthcoming low carbon fuel strategy. I think my final thing would be to, it's a bit of a plug to the other end users in the room that may not be here. It's the truck operators, the heavy duty vehicle operators. Your fleets have big, durable engines, the majority of them, and they are an excellent fleet to take up some of these products made out of waste recycling, plastic waste recycling. The biodiesel that's made from recycled carbon fuels will have an excellent home within these heavy-duty vehicles, and we can achieve some really significant greenhouse gas savings by further uptake. And so it's an ask to you as well to consider the other opportunities that there may be within the world of chemical recycling end products. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. That's a very good point, Chloe, because we are focusing primarily on households and then the everyday, day-to-day cars, and we forget that there are so many other means of transportation that they lack any solution for decarbonization at the moment. So it's more than one thing that we should focus, right?
If you allow me, one more thing that I've just
Please do.
remembered. There was actually a recent review by Patrick Vallance on pro-innovation regulation, getting that the right way around, sorry. Pro-innovation regulation for technologies. There was a government response related to that. Within that review of pro-innovation regulation, there was a comment around waste and innovative use of around waste, and that the regulatory system feels restrictive at times. And within our government response, we have committed to explore the opportunity to have a waste sandbox within investment zones to explore innovative uses of waste and the recycling there. So that would be another call to industry innovators to watch out for further detail on that, to engage with our colleagues in DEFRA and to DESNES and DLUC and ourselves to be able to make best use of any waste sandbox that will come.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's very important to all remember that chemical recycling can play potentially a very crucial role on decarbonizing transportation and go far beyond that. And we all have very ambitious goals for meeting the net zero goals. So it's not about competing with each other. We need more than one company to work together. So I think we are at the end. Thank you very much for choosing to stay with us and not enjoying the sun outside. 3 minutes. 3 minutes, okay. So if you have any questions, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's Amjad Hussain from ABB. ABB is a leading technology company in terms of electrical and automation. And I'm working in ABB as a senior capture team lead for large projects. And in the last 5 years, I was following a lot the plastic to liquid, what we call it in ABB. And my questions to you, Chloe. You said that your ambition is to have 5 plants for producing SAF in 2025. Did I hear that correctly?
Under construction.
So that was my question, because to have those 5 plants, I would assume that there is a lot of things happening now, because to have those.
Yeah, so that's specific commitment and ambition is around the plants being in construction, so they might not be in production at that point. What we're doing to be able to support that ambition is supporting demonstrator plants through our Advanced Fuels Fund, the £165 million Advanced Fuels Fund. We're also developing our SAF mandate, our Sustainable Aviation Fuel mandate, to create that demand. And then we're also working with industry through, for example, forums such as our Jet Zero Council to understand what may be needed further, if anything. But we are still yet to see how the SAF mandate will itself come to be, because we're still in that consultation phase.
So it's not an ambition, it's just some physical actually steps was taking on the ground actually to start building those 5 plants.
Well, it's for industry to fulfill that ambition, but we are supporting them within a partnership with policies.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
More questions? Hi, Jeff Brighty from Eurotechnology. So we're an advanced recycler dealing with plastics. So I know Helen very well. Hi, Helen. It's a question for Chloe. I'm interested in the biogenic aspects of SAF. Shouldn't we be focusing on recycling biogenic content materials such as tyres rather than plastics to create sustainable SAF, given the fact that there could be a bit of a demand for both going forward?
I'm going to have to answer this a bit politically because the detail of our recycled carbon fuels consultation, our response there hasn't come out yet. It is coming in the coming months, so do watch this space there. But that stat that I said earlier about the 25 million tons of residual waste every year produced in the UK, which is being incinerated or put to landfill, a significant fraction of that is biogenic. I think it's something 55 to 70%. And so by introducing capabilities such as recycled carbon fuel production pathways and support for that, we will unlock that biogenic waste. The consultation that I mentioned is predominantly around the RTFO, the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligation, which does include support across the spheres and would look to include the biogenic side of it as well. That's where we see significant potential of being able to support recycled carbon fuels because it allows us to further capitalize on wasted waste, shall we say.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all participants and Dr. Garifalu as a moderator.
Just like to thank my panelists. Thank you very much. I really want to thank my panelists for being here today and for sharing your ideas and passion about chemical recycling and meeting net zero goals. Thank you very much.